Greetings and welcome to another installment of Charleston Chatter. My name is Meg White and I am a director of the Charleston Conference and a senior consultant at Delta Think. I'm joined today by Kevin Guthrie, who is president of Ithaca, the people behind so many of the foundational tools and services that power higher education. You all know their names: JSTOR, Portico, ArtStore, and Ithaca S&R. Kevin was kind enough to be part of Charleston In Between, our event last July, and he contributed his thoughts and observations on exiting the tunnel, reflections from savvy executives about what the bright light of post-COVID-19 offers. If you were able to join us, you remember, or if you weren't, this panel specifically addressed some of the individual, organizational, and leadership challenges created by the need to respond to COVID. And it also looked to the future when we might start to imagine a time after COVID. So we're so grateful for Kevin for coming back 6 months on to revisit this. And Kevin, welcome. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Meg. It's great to be here and I appreciate the invite. It's nice of you to have me.
Well, our pleasure. So we'll get started, jumping right in. I guess the best place to start is to ask how it's going at Ithaca. Your comments last summer, you used what I thought was a great analogy of, when you're changing apps on your phone and they start vibrating. So you described that as sort of your day-to-day last July. So I guess maybe to continue that analogy, have those apps stop jiggling? And what percent normal, back to normal, would you say that Ithaca is today?
Well, I wish the apps were not jiggling. It's that's a kind of the metaphor there is just this kind of sense of instability. That at that moment when you get the iPhone into that mode, you can move all these things around and they can change. They're not locked in anymore. There's no structure around them. And so I think that's going on. I think the other thing that, when people talk about the new normal or normalcy and, our pursuit of normalcy, I mean, I think we all kind of know it's not going back to the way it was. So we all know that there are things that have changed in our lives that have changed for good. Like they're not going to go back to the way they were. But I think the thing that I feel like more than anything that I really am, hoping for, striving for, is not so much normalcy or a new normal or whatever it is, but some sense of stability. That our world is so upset by so many factors, and things feel unstable. So we're operating here at Ithaca in a mode that we don't think is the permanent mode, right? So our particular approach has been to be very employee-centered from the get-go, and we talked about this in the summer. And it started out with obviously, a moment with incredible concern about people's health. We had offices in New York in March 2020, and it was an extremely scary time. I mean, most of us wouldn't even walk down the street with somebody across the street. We thought we might get infected. We just had, no idea. So it was so fearful. And we really, were focused on trying to help our employees feel safe. And that was both physically and emotionally. So that was really our focus. And, I think that we've held that focus pretty much all the way through while the world has changed. But so our approach currently is, it's voluntary whether you want to come into the office. We did go ahead and bring our offices back online, as it were, and people can come to the office. There are different regulations we have to follow in Michigan versus New York, et cetera. People can come to the office, but many people don't. We have very few people actually going to the office. And so, you have this sense of like, well, is this the way it's going to be? But I think everybody right now feels they're not sure of that, right? It doesn't feel permanent yet. It doesn't feel stable. It feels like we're in this transition moment. And so I think, that's difficult. I mean, that's a difficult feeling is to not, have if in effect, I think the app, metaphor still holds that like having those locked down again and be stable and an expectation of some stability would be really nice, but we definitely don't have that yet.
So thinking about that, did you ever imagine in your head like a timetable or a schedule for reaching that new, let's call it not new normal, but the new stable, or where things were stable?
Yeah, I think we kept hoping for it, right? I mean, I think at one point we thought, you set out a target of a period of time, and you thought, okay, by then it surely will be better. Or, in the summer of 20, when it wasn't cold anymore, or 21 when it was coming, and I think every time we started to get relief, then there's been, a surge somewhere else, or a surge coming, or a change. So I think it's been challenging in that respect. And then, I think that's, so we don't have real stability as far as our work environment and how that's going to work. And I think that, that is just unsettling. So I think that's just one overarching piece of this period of time, which again, I think has to do with trying to find some sense of like, what can we count on on a day-to-day basis. So I think that, at this point we are currently, we keep pushing that time out. And, our approach again has been to be working in a way that's effective as possible in this voluntary mode with people, out of the office. And, I think we had hoped that, frankly, we had hoped that in the fall we would be able to, have a more stable approach. For us, I think we're now looking, we thought about, the beginning of the year, and now I think we're looking to next spring. As it turns out, for us, specifically, we have leases come up in our New York offices in April. So we're definitely moving from one physical location to another in the beginning of April. So
Wow.
So that's a marker for us, and that's again, right now we're not expecting that means anybody actually is moving in. We're definitely moving out of our stuff in one office, and then as people come back to the office, they'll be able to come into a new location.
So, and last summer you absolutely led your remarks with the focus on your employees' physical and emotional well-being, certainly. But you also identified potentially some opportunities for positive change that were created by the need to adjust to COVID. Can you talk a little bit about those challenges / they're challenges, but have you turned any of those into opportunities, and maybe what that looks like today?
Yes, definitely. I think the one paradox that we discovered, and I think I said in the summer something like it was amazing that we had to be further apart to get closer together. And what I meant by that was that we had never actually had an all-staff meeting before. I mean, we'd had a couple in person that were really, really expensive, a couple days on an offsite location. It was really tough to get folks together because we had some employees in Ann Arbor, Michigan, some in Princeton, New Jersey, and then 2-3 offices in New York City. So we had people all over, and each of those places had their own microcultures. And so we started an all-staff, via video conference like Zoom, like this, every Friday, and that brought the whole organization together. And originally it was really just to communicate what we were going to do with respect to COVID, and to reassure people about what we were doing. So it was very much focused on individual uncertainty, anxieties, et cetera, around what was happening, and sharing with each other, what it was like to be in New York, what it was. Michigan was also a place where there was a high rate of COVID in the early stages. So we were sharing with each other. So it was not really a corporate thing that started it, in the sense that it was really motivated by people feeling a kind of collective need to be with each other in that time. But we've now had that every Friday, and now it is an opportunity to communicate things about all kinds of things related to the organization. And frankly, if it had been that we were all going to go back to 5 days a week in the office every single day in our multiple offices, we would still have the all staff every Friday. It's a very valuable way to connect the organization around some core values and core principles, in addition to helping people all hear the same message. So that's a specific example to say, what's obvious that everybody's had certain kinds of experience with, which is that some aspects of this, virtual environment are really effective. We found our board meetings have been, good. I mean, you lose some of the engagement, obviously, around the edges of interpersonal engagement. But for our trustees who live around the country and have big jobs, it's been possible for them to participate in our board meetings more easily. And so we've had great attendance at all the meetings, and it enables a kind of engagement, obviously at a distance, that you can't have otherwise. So I think there are some ways that it's been valuable. I also think that the combination of the all staffs and the nature of the virtual environment, in some ways I think it's been challenging, but I think people they're more willing to express their concerns, and so you hear more about what's going on in a way, and I think that gives you an opportunity to respond to some of the challenges that are out there and that the organization faces.
Well, and I think also, I'm just sitting here hearing you talk, really good opportunity for coworkers to listen to each other, in an environment that maybe forces you to listen a little bit more actively if you're not in the same room. You've really got to dial in and pay attention, to what's here in front of you. So it's interesting with Charleston, as you're aware, in 2020, all virtual, and what happened there was what we found was we got to give so many more people a seat at our table, right? Because it was virtual. If you couldn't, it was the first time the conference had ever done a full complement of virtual offerings. And, we have so many international attendees, so many people that weren't physically able to come to Charleston. So just from an equity perspective, what we really found, what's positive to come out of COVID, certainly we learned that with the board at Charleston, we can include so many more people in the conversation if we have a very robust online component to the conference. So somewhat analogous to that ability to bring all of your locations together and hear everyone's voice on a regular basis. So that's amazing.
Your comment, sorry to interrupt you, but your comment brings out one of the big unknowns, right? In as we look to the future, which is, what does that hybrid mode look like? I think at our own organization, I don't see us in any foreseeable future demanding that everybody come to the office every day, 5 days a week. That's just not where we're going to be. I think in society, but definitely us as an organization. And so those questions of equity, where the technology makes it possible to do the things that you're talking about, it also creates those question marks around equity in this specific and more detailed sense. So what does it mean to participate in a meeting where some people are online and some people are in person? And, obviously we used to have those video conference rooms with a camera up there on the wall. And then there was, the video screens on the wall that people were, sort of hovering over the meeting. And often those people did not feel at all involved in the meeting, and people were conversing in the room. So far in the cases where we've tried to do some of that, we have gone the way I think probably most of you out there are going, which is everyone has their computer and they're looking in their computer. Like, we might not be 5 people in the room, but we're all looking at our computer with only one, audio on, so that everybody is having the same experience. And it seems a bit odd to be sitting around a table looking at the computer, but it makes perfect sense for those, for the balance of folks participating in that meeting. So I think that's a very low tech kind of quote unquote solution to that problem. But I think that problem is going to be one that's going to be really challenging as we go forward, because if we decide after that meeting, the 5 of us who've all looked into our computers, to go talk on the way out and think about some different problem and then continue the conversation as in person for even 5 or 10 minutes, those people who are not in the room won't hear that. And what does that mean? What does that mean for them understanding where you're going? What does that mean for them in terms of relationships with different people in the office? I think those types of challenges in the around equity in the organizational context are yet to be evaluated and yet to be figured out.
Agree. So continuing on those lines, Ithaca has been, on the equity lines, Ithaca has been a proactive participant, amazingly so, in helping ensure that there's infrastructure in place to support remote and online learning. I think, the initial opening of Ithaca content to JSTOR subscribers in June of 21, and then the more recent extension of this policy until July, I believe, of 2022. I just think it's an outstanding example of Ithaca's organizational leadership. But you haven't made a secret about that. That's triggered some internal questions for you at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about that initiative maybe, and what you've learned to date and what that might mean as you look forward?
Yeah, so the basic idea, just to summarize it, is really a mission-driven approach that was again one of those things that's revealed by the pandemic, and then you ask yourself some questions. So when everyone went online literally overnight, and there were huge threats to budgets and resources, we made the decision, as you pointed out, to provide expanded access to JSTOR. So just to summarize it, if an institution has one collection to JSTOR during this period, they have access to all the collections. And typically the way JSTOR recovers its cost is by licensing collections. So some institutions might have 3, some might have 20. Obviously, the institution that has 20 pays more than the institution that has 3. But the idea was that if you have only 3, during this time, we're going to just expand the access to you to all of them, and we're not going to ask for more money for that. So that has led to a lot of additional access during that time for all that content. And while it has costed us more to deliver that, we have figured out ways to be able to do that. And we've done that for a year and a half now. And so you ask the question, yes, we have additional costs, but this is a lot more access for the money. So you then say, are there, as a mission-based not-for-profit, you kind of look in the mirror and say, is our model right? Is our model right? Are we, are there ways that we can extend ourselves so that this level of access can be maintained at the amount of resources we're getting in, and hopefully continue to grow, but not necessarily be in the business of trying to maximize revenue or maximize profit, rather maximizing impact. So we developed the model for licensing JSTOR collections in 1995, literally. And so we haven't had to adjust it really in that time. And it's been very effective, both in growing the impact. We're able to make access available without charge in the developing world. In Africa, we have licenses over 3,000 secondary schools at very low fees, so that we've expanded and democratized content to a great degree by being able to have the model that we've had. But when you look at the situation with COVID, wow, we were able to provide a lot more access in that way. And so what we decided to do was to extend the access, because in part COVID has not succumbed yet to all of our best efforts and continues to challenge us all over the world. So we extended to next June 2022. But the other reason for doing so was to invest time in trying to think about possible new models that would enhance the amount of access that we provide at the level of revenue we currently generate. And that's a much harder problem than it sounds. It's very difficult to rebalance all those things, given the way that the natural process of people making lots of different decisions about licensing and costs and all that. So trying to figure out a way to balance that going forward is a challenge, but we're working on it. And I think the goal is to I often say that our longer term goal is to get more and more open, right? To have more and more open content on our infrastructure. And we built this, invested in this infrastructure. The community has invested in this infrastructure that is JSTOR. And so we should be trying to get the most possible value out of that infrastructure that's been created. So putting more and more open content, having more and more of the content be open, on the platform is where we're trying to head. And so, factoring those things in and trying to develop, a model that can sustain us for the next 25 years just as effectively, but maximizes the impact and access that we can provide on this infrastructure is what we're aiming for.
I'm really, the term that jumped out at me in that answer was impact, and just having a 30-year career in scholarly publishing, I wonder, commercial, nonprofit, society, otherwise, if you create content, if you manage content, if you started with impact, how that might trickle down, regardless of what the mission of the organization is. And I think because if you have impact, then you can be so many different things. You can move in so many different directions. But of course, the other component there, and you referenced it, is sustainability. So it's a balancing act for certain, but it's just been fascinating to watch Ithaca and JSTOR really take a leadership role in making sure that the work of scholarship continues to move forward, even given the COVID challenges. So switching channels a little bit, back to your remarks in the summer, and I want to talk a little bit specifically about leaders. And you acknowledged last summer, and I agree, we are all leaders at some level. You remarked on the need for greater transparency and the ability for leadership, in tough times to answer tough questions. So specifically, the question you talked about was why. Do you have any advice for leaders who are being challenged in very unstable times to answer the question why?
Yeah, I think the context of that was dealing with the stresses and challenges, and we face them in a variety of ways. We're wrestling with long history and legacy of racial and social injustice that affects employees, it affects our world, and so those issues become front and center, and people are dissatisfied with the way things have been and the way things are, and so there will be times that are really challenging, actually, to try to move in the direction that we feel we need to move as a society, we feel as an organization. And so there's impatience often for movement in a certain way, or there might be challenges that come from a variety of perspectives. And so you're making decisions that affect people in different ways. And, I think there's a tendency to just try to make those decisions and move on. And I think it is really important to try to explain the reasons that you make decisions, because frankly, there are so many different perspectives on every decision these days. And there is the opportunity for people to signal their disagreement with those decisions in environments that can go viral or can get out to other people, and whether that's other people in your organization or other people much more broadly. And so I think you have to both be on a long-term path. Your beacon has to be transparency, because I think the reality is that if you're not sharing what you're doing, somebody else is going to share that for you. And so it's not so much as like managing the message or a PR thing in that respect. I think it's really just about aiming for transparency. And you mentioned a moment ago about sustainability. I think this is also about sustainability of the organization from a cultural point of view. So I think but the challenge is that you can't just decide tomorrow, well, okay, we're gonna be 100% transparent on everything, because actually, as much as that might be appealing in a kind of idealistic way, it can lead to dysfunction, disarray, and basically not be good for anyone, least of which the people who may be looking for that transparency. So I think, finding that balance, and I think that balance comes from really having a goal to be transparent and move in that direction. And at the same time, when you have to make decisions and people disagree with the decisions as they will, you're still moving toward that lighthouse. You're still moving toward that, but you you explain why, and you don't necessarily turn in the direction at every moment of everything that you're hearing, because if you do, the ship just sort of keeps turning around in the night and it doesn't actually get to where you're going. So I think that, that's an easy thing for me to say. I watch presidents and universities. I watch out there. It's so difficult right now because being able to make decisions in an environment of this kind of high-pitched and justified sensitivity, combined with the ability to communicate on these platforms that get the word out, instantaneously, that can lead to, frankly, moments of paralysis for institutions. So I think it's a really challenging time, and I don't profess at all to be some kind of expert at all, other than just to say that in our experience, just trying to be a goal of transparency with explanations for why you're making your decisions, and hopefully people will respect that.
Well, it reminds me, and again, my background in scholarly publishing is really on the STM side, medical side, but we talk a lot in medicine about evidence-based practice, right? So, you have to, once you decide, make a clinical decision, you should be able to cite the evidence that supports that decision. And that kind of transparency gives you the throughput to feel confident in your decision-making. And there may be some analogies there, not, you talked about not managing the message, but, being transparent about the decision, the factors that went into making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and it's you're not always obviously going to be right, and you're sometimes going to, not only make the wrong decision, but you may not communicate it the right way. And I think you just have to keep, but I think you can't shy away from that explanation. It's better to get it out there and to have the opportunity to talk about it.
Right. And that's what makes being in these leadership roles so challenging, especially in these days and times, for sure. So we'll wrap up here, and this has been awesome, and thank you so much. But just one parting question for you. The history of COVID, obviously, global impact still being written. I read in the paper today that Europe, the eastern part of Europe, is having a huge outbreak, so we are far from out of the woods. But at this stage, in our little corner of the world, what, if anything, do you think we've learned? You've mentioned some of the changes at Ithaca, but sort of from a larger perspective, even a societal perspective, what do you think we've learned? And do you think that we're starting to see some new norms? And what might the attributes of that new landscape look like? Are they friendly? Are they foe? How do they fall?
Well,
big question, big broad one here at the end, Kevin. Sorry.
Just one person with an opinion. I think one thing that I've learned that I don't think I really fully appreciated before this is, it started to with social media, but we've really seen it, is that it's always both friend and foe. And unfortunately, I think that has become even more dramatic in our current world of sort of, extremes and people fighting with each other as opposed to trying to resolve problems. But, things, Facebook we've seen all the ways now that it can be really bad. And yet I think we all experience ways that it's joined our families together or given us an opportunity to stay in touch with people we didn't know before. And, in the early days, we celebrated the Arab Spring and said, oh, isn't that fantastic? The way, social media made democracy move. And, we've seen the same way that kind of, that's sort of that same other side of behaviors that get what I would call swarm behaviors or behaviors where opinions get moved across whole swaths of people. And so, there seems to be always both the plus side and the minus side. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's one thing that I've learned that, and I think about it very carefully as we think about a lot of these new technologies that, we saw Mark Zuckerberg's announcement of Meta and the discussion of the metaverse and extended reality and virtual reality and artificial intelligence. And I think, I think before all this, I probably was a little bit more of a tech, I was a little bit more of a tech enthusiast in that sense of, I think now I still can see the many ways that it's going to be very positive, but I have a little bit more of a sense of like, okay, what is the negative going to be? And it doesn't take a genius. I mean, we all know that we worry about robots taking over the lives, and we've watched science fiction films, and we worry about those things. But I think we've actually really seen now ways that well-intentioned technologies that started out doing really great things can end up having impacts that we didn't anticipate or fully appreciate. And so I think that I think that's one of the really important lessons, and I think that's, that is being, people are spending a lot more time, than they did in the beginning, worrying about issues like privacy related to these technologies. So I think that's one thing that I would say that I've taken from it is a greater care about the unintended consequences of so-called progress, and thinking about that. So I think as far as education is concerned, we obviously got vaulted into this online world without any real substantive preparation. And so I think that the kind of outcomes of that are a bit mixed, in that I think people have seen areas where online learning can really work. But there's so many examples where it was brought on so quickly that people felt like, students felt like they had a really bad experience. And generally speaking, I think college and universities have been really eager to get back, quote unquote, on campus and get in person, and feel like that was, that really that period was actually missed opportunity for students. And I think that also misses the full point, that there are ways that education can meet people where they are, by taking advantage of technology. So this again is one more example of how I think these technologies are both friend and foe, and unfortunately, that makes it tougher to kind of become, sort of enthusiastic in the pure sense toward one objective. But I do continue to think that that the big thing that's going to happen is that more and more people are going to need and want to be educated at every point in their lives, and that is going to happen through, some versions of the medium we're on right now, to extended reality type things that give people the opportunity to learn, as it were, just in time, at times that are convenient for them, and that help them do the things that they need to do. And I think that is not really something that is, obvious from what we've just experienced with the pandemic, but I do think it's inevitable, just because of the challenges of having to get to a particular place and for your learning, and the fact that a lot of it can happen, as we've said, a lot of social interaction can happen without having to be in person. So those would be like just my quick thoughts on that, on that huge question and topic.
Huge question and topic, but you handled it very well. So Kevin, I am so grateful that you took the time to join us today. I think a lot of great discussion here, and best of luck to you and to the folks at Ithaca. Keep doing what you're doing, and supporting the rest of us out here in the scholarly information landscape. We certainly appreciate your time, and wish you the best of luck as you continue to move forward.
Well, it's my pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate the questions, hard as they are, and just, we're all in this together, trying to figure out, our best way of, as it is, muddling through, but hopefully doing it in a way. I do think there are ways that we've learned, and we're better for it, frankly. I mean, I think there are a lot of ways that society is going to be better on the other side of this, from the lessons that we've learned and the things that have been revealed, that need to be better than they were before. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
And I'm going to just say, I think I took two buzzwords for me away from the conversation today. One was impact, and what does it mean for a content creator to have impact? But the second is, what does COVID reveal? And I think that's maybe change is not the right paradigm. I think you're closer to it when you say, okay, what did this challenge reveal? And let's all, and you have to make sure to pay attention to what it revealed. Can't look away.
Yeah, I hope we can adapt to the new reality and what we learned from what was revealed. So that's our target. That's what we're hoping to do. But I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. It was a lot of fun, and
Thanks.
well, I look forward to seeing you in person before too long.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Thank you, Kevin. Have a good
All right,
afternoon.
take care. Thanks
Bye-bye.
a lot. Bye-bye.